I've been asked to speak today about business activism and what we're up to. And Trevor, thanks for that introduction. And I must say I enjoy your passion and the way you are very motivated to get action going in the city. So it's very much aligned to where we're going. And I'm going to give you an overview in a few minutes. But just to start in terms of setting the scene, this is a revolution, what we're going through now. The changes that we've seen in our environment, this isn't normal. It will never be normal again. So we need to readjust our thinking in terms of how we do things. Trevor spoke about competition earlier. That's something that we've had to shift in the business community to be more collaborative rather than competitive. And you'll see as I outline what we do, how we're doing that. But essentially, we're in an environment of instability and polycrisis, okay? And if you look at it, it really, the big trigger and the underlying issues were there before was COVID-19. And it's like a match that was struck. And if you think about what has ensued since then, it has dramatically changed things. And if you take something like, besides the virus and the toll it took on the world's population and so on, we also had climate change that became much more visible during that period as well. And that's also influencing the revolution that's taking place in business, because business also has to change the way they operate. Interestingly, on a global level, this year, you've got 49% of the world's population, representing 64 countries, are going to go and vote for new governments. That's quite a big deal, and especially when you've got countries like the US, Russia, and India going to the polls. And there's been a big shift around the world as well when you look at politics, a big shift to the right. And then you also look at the global conflicts that are taking place in places like Gaza and Ukraine and the impact that it has on our country too. So you've got all these global issues going on. And then from a national perspective, we've seen the collapse of electricity and logistics, which is more serious than the electricity issues at the moment. We've also seen municipal service delivery collapse, which has happened over time, but it's now all come to a head. So it feels like everything's happening at the same time. So it's a very difficult environment in which to operate. And really what we did when we realized, I joined the chamber just over 2.5 years ago. And when I got here, one of the first things I did was to go out and talk to as many people as possible to find out what is going on in the environment. And when I realized what was going on, I took that back to our board. And our board representatives are basically people from key companies around the metro. And we all concluded that we're at a tipping point now when you join the dots, you know. So what we decided was, what are we as a business community going to do about this? Are we going to just sit back and keep begging everybody to do the right thing and expecting government and the politicians to do the right thing? Or are we going to do something about it ourselves? Because if we don't do something, you know, what is going to happen? And we concluded that we want to stay in Nelson Mandela Bay. We don't want to lose business investment. We don't want to lose jobs. So we need to become part of the change. So that has moved us into this era of collaboration. And this is the strategic plan that we came up with. It's a very simplistic plan, and it's really motivated around this drive to save and to attract investment and jobs to Nelson Mandela Bay, because that is what is going to save us. And we've got 6 key priorities, but the one that I want to show you is research, which is getting the city working again. That's our number 1 priority, and that's where a lot of our work has been centered. But as we move into this year, I'll also talk about how we intend reinventing the economy because of all the global changes that are happening. So really, in terms of these interventions that we've been doing, it's all about thinking differently and tackling problems differently. So the thinking was inspired during COVID. When we went into the hard lockdown on the Thursday, by the Sunday, we actually had doctors getting hold of us to tell us the gravity of the situation in terms of the level of unreadiness of our hospitals and so on. So we, as a business community, immediately leapt into action while people were baking banana bread. I was, at the time, I worked in the automotive industry, and I took on the job of getting 160 hospital beds operational at Livingston and Provincial Hospital. And we did that in 10 days. So, because we realized it was an emergency and nobody knew that we did that. VW started with their plans to build a field hospital and to get funding for that and so on. And then we also realized that medical supplies would be a critical area. You know, at that time you didn't have masks and sanitizers and all of that. We got businesses to donate, but we also, what we did is we the Isuzu Vehicle Conversion and Distribution Center, we turned that into a medical storage and distribution hub. We used the trucks, because remember, everything came to a standstill, and we were making sure that all of that went where it was supposed to go, to the hospitals. So behind the scenes, I think business played a key role there, and I think that also helped to inspire us to keep going. So soon after, or while that was on the go, we had the water management crisis that started to become very, very serious. In fact, the annual report that was released from the municipality yesterday shows that 43% of our water losses are still unaccounted for. And what we did is we actually got teams of people and we got companies to support it, where we went into 7 impoverished areas and we fixed leaks. And we also trained community members up along the way, but it's to make the point about the leaks and that they can be fixed, and also the impact of the water losses. So so that initiative we had to get City Council to approve through something called Adopt a Leak. But we ended up saving the city about 1.5 million litres of water a day just through that. And we're now continuing to push where we need the water infrastructure issues resolved. Maybe just also talking about related to water is sanitation. We also realized that there was an issue with the sanitation system. So we've also been engaged with engineers from various companies that have been working with the municipality in terms of identifying the issues and coming up with a strategy to address it. So the support that we do, it doesn't have to be just giving money. And in fact, we don't want to hand over money to anyone. It's about your expertise and you know, and your contributions you can make from an intellectual perspective as well, and also by taking action. And then what we also did, we realized, you know, vandalism became a big issue, especially, you know, another thing post-COVID that kind of came to the forefront. And because of the impact of vandalism, especially on substations that serve into factories, and we've been tracking all these unplanned power outages, and a lot of them is caused because of incidents of vandalism. And when a plant goes down, immediately people are put on short time, export contracts are not met. So the impact is huge from an economic and personal and community perspective. So what we did is we started Adopt a Substation, and we've got businesses involved in extending their security from their operations to their adjacent substations so that they can help ensure that their substations don't go down. We're probably the only place in the world that adopts substations, but this has been vital. Where we have adopted substations, we haven't had any incidents, so that has been effective. But what we also realized is that we need to think differently in terms of how we do things. So we can't keep going back to City Council every time we want to do something. So we came up with something called a master MOU, and it's difficult because it's difficult to get council to meet and also to get them to approve things. But we pushed hard, we got that over the line, and that really is a generic MOU which gives us the permission to work with the relevant officials to address a more broader span of issues. So that's something we're using as leverage now to get the city working again. Collaboration is key to what we're doing. One of the things we also did early on is we're an apolitical organization. So, but what we did do is we met with every single political party. We had delegations coming through here, and some heavyweight delegations as well, former mayors and even some national leaders of political parties that came here. And we gave them all the same message around the instability, the political instability, and how that affects the running of the city. And that as politicians, they need to do the right thing and put the best interests of the city and its people first, and not their own personal agendas. But that exercise, while it didn't change behavior, it was very important, because now when we have these coalition changes that happen every 6 months or so, we at least know the people who come in. So we're getting faster and faster of working with whoever is in power so that we can do what needs to be done. Very concerning if you look at city managers, for example. Since 2020, there have been something like 13 different acting city managers. So that's a key position within the municipality. And you can see there's pictures there of all the different mayors that have been here since I've been here. And then we've also been working with the NMB Civil Society Coalition. And we think, and that's why we're all here today, because it's very important that other stakeholders and sectors are also part of the solution in terms of driving positive change and taking action. And I've spoken about our evolution of thinking and how it all started, where we started with adopting substations and leaks, and eventually we got a master MOU signed. What I didn't mention is, as business, one of the other things we did is we adopted 76 schools around the city, and we did this based on the highest water losses at schools, because we found that 10% of the total water losses happened at schools. So businesses also got very involved in fixing the leaks at schools, installing rainwater harvesting measures, and also fixing ablution facilities, which gives dignity back. So that was actually quite amazing, I think, some of those initiatives that have been ongoing. And then in terms of our interventions, you know, once you start, then you keep going. And once you start realizing there's an issue, then what is the solution? So one of the things we also started working on was when we realized how serious the power crisis was, we formed a renewable energy cluster, and we got basically 20% of the city's electricity usage together in a room. So it was the highest energy users being manufacturers in the city. And we got a lot of them to sign up to be part of a renewable energy cluster. And that cluster is now on track. In fact, Growth Point has also joined that cluster on a national level. And the solar portion of that power will come on stream from early next year, and wind will follow a year later. The total span of that supply is 250 megawatts, which is huge. And what we're hoping is that initiative will help offset load shedding for this metro in terms of levels of load shedding. So that's one of the drivers, and then it also has knock-on impact in terms of the broader business community and people living in the city. And then also in the power space, with load shedding, you know, factories aren't made to go on and off, on and off. In fact, some of the factories with their smelting processes and so on, if they switched off, it takes them days to start up again. And the waste that happens, even when you just have a power surge, it can stop a production line and cause huge issues in terms of cost and also stoppages. So what we did is we came up with this idea of a 24-hour voluntary schedule, and we got 40 manufacturers onto that, where they have more predictable load shedding. So instead of going on, off, they're down for 24 hours in a row, and then you can produce for so many days. And we've got about 36 manufacturers that unfortunately didn't meet the criteria, but they also want to be part of that. So we're also still working on solutions around that. But I've had companies tell me that if it wasn't for that, they would have closed their doors already, because the impact on manufacturing is huge. And I've spoken about the sanitation system, the work that we've been doing there. And maybe something that's very interesting is when we had the national shutdown last year, National Day of Shutdown, what we did is we quickly mobilized the business community. We've got various groupings via WhatsApp of businesses grouped by category. We have like a logistics crisis group. We have all our clusters into groups, safety and security, and so on. And then we all aligned on the action that we need to take on a proactive basis. We also linked in with the security companies, with SAPs, the municipal police, and so on. And as a business community, what we ended up doing is the night before the national stay away, we collected over 4,000 tires, because these tires magically appear just before you have protest action. And that obviously, when you remove them, then it takes that away. So it was a very peaceful day the next day. And that was actually quite amazing how everybody pulled together. And then we also have adopted traffic lights. So there's some traffic lights around the city that don't go down when there's load shedding. There's an inverter solution there, but there also had to be some kind of anti-vandalism mechanism attached to that. So those are some of the initiatives. And then the big one that we're working on is the geographic clusters. And I think when we started this, some people thought that I was crazy, why are you going this route? And I think people didn't quite believe that is possible. But our first cluster that was started was called the Perseverance Business Cluster. And that area, the economy of that cluster is about the size of the Kucha IDZ. There's over 10,000 people employed there, and there's a big mix of different manufacturers and businesses based there. So we started that cluster, and that collaboration was actually very positive because you ended up having businesses who were in the same area, but they didn't know each other, they're neighbors. And now they were suddenly in the same room. And then they aligned on a strategy. We came up with a project proposal, and we established a formal business association. And that cluster has now gone on to do some great things. They've even had National Treasury come down, and they've applied to become an industrial precinct. And if we get approval for that, then we'll also get access to funding on a national level to fix the infrastructure there. But the camaraderie between the businesses there is absolutely amazing. And that has also inspired the creation of other clusters. So we now have 8 clusters around the city. We've even, because we were making this up as we went along, we literally started on a blank slate of paper. We've come up with how to establish a cluster now. So every time we start one, we foster and foster at doing it. And you can see here, these are the clusters. They even all have their own logos. The most recent clusters, so we have a cluster in Kariga, for example. We have in Deelparty, in Struendal. And then the most recent ones to join is the Barkens Valley and the Beachfront cluster. And that mobilization, I think, is fantastic in terms of getting people together for a common purpose, and also where there are other structures within those areas, they also slotting in. So everybody's working together with a common purpose. And for me, the key to this is setting aside your differences and rather focus on what you have in common and work together on what you have in common. And the other big learning I've had is positive leadership. If you have someone leading a cluster that is negative, then that cluster can't move forward because they're so overwhelmed by the problems that they get hung up on that and they can't take action. So where there is positive leaders in place, those clusters have actually been more successful. So you can see various pictures there, but the clusters have been reinstating road markings, they've been fixing potholes. In Struendal, for example, they have secured all their substations because that's critical for those manufacturers where they just can't have any more unplanned power outages. They still have them because we have municipal infrastructure issues. So that's also a priority for us now. But you get the drift. They are active. And that picture there, the bigger one, is a session we had last week where we got all the cluster leads together. And we had like a briefing session and a motivational session to get everybody focused on the year ahead. We're encouraging all of them to have formal strategies in place and formal plans. In fact, the Perseverance Cluster is now given, a lot of them are pooling funding together to support what they need done in their areas. I did have pushback where businesses, and I still do, where they say, well, we pay rates and taxes, why should we pay more? But I think people are starting to realize that if you don't do this, then the alternative is far worse in terms of losing that investment and jobs and so on. We've also had approaches where people say, well, can't we just pay our rates and taxes over to the chamber instead of the municipality? We can't support that either. It would be immoral. Communities also need to get services. So, so that just shows you a map of the city. We've even established a code of ethics that they have to sign up for, because we obviously can't have vigilantism and misalignment in terms of what we're trying to do, because basically we want to serve the greater good of the local economy and also the communities that surround that. So, and then we also have a 9th cluster that's going to be established this month in Fairview. That area is probably one of the better, more modern areas, but they want to make sure they hold the line there. And it will also run along the William Moffat Expressway. So that's the next one that will be established. We've also been approached from one of the township areas where they want a cluster established. So we're going to see where that goes as well. But what we do in terms of the clusters is there has to be willingness from the leadership, and they've got to step up and drive, because it's about all of us as a collective taking action. It can't be just one or two individuals, you know. So leadership has to come from all quarters, and I think that's where South Africa has been weak, where we've got a good constitution, we've got good policies, plans, you name it, but there's been no implementation and action. And that's what we need to drive. And if we can get that thinking going throughout business and churches and NGOs and all the different groupings, I think we can definitely build a more positive future for our country and our city. And that just shows you the different cluster phases, and it's like a bottom-up approach that we pursue in terms of the clusters. We identify the need, and then we establish the cluster, and then the projects, and then we're also looking now at working the system. So like what Perseverance is doing to get National Treasury to come and give support, we're also looking at, you've got a municipal budget where there's unspent money on infrastructure. How do we get that money to be spent on infrastructure? So that's where we're trying to go strategically. We're also looking at the IDP. We must proactively provide inputs into that. We must influence all these things. All of us must give inputs. And we also want to continue to leverage our master MOU. So, and ultimately, our aim is to have an enabling environment in which business in the city can operate. And then we also track the collective impact of everything we're doing. And you can see how we record that. We also have a help desk, where when businesses get frustrated with sanitation leaks or water leaks or whatever the issues are, they raise it through our help desk, and then we try and accelerate resolution of that. And as a last resort, we'd use the master MOU just to go and fix it, you know. So that's the approach we've taken there. We've got task teams as well, and we've got some very smart people running and working in these task teams. So we get experts from across the board. So you sit in, often I sit in this room with engineers and you're talking about electricity. In the beginning, I found it tough, but I think I'm now able to hold my own because I've had to learn everything you can about electricity. But we have an electricity task team. We've got water and sanitation, safety and security, and then transport and logistics. And then a property task team is the newest one. And that really is around the ease of doing business, and it's accelerating business plan approvals and so on. And then what we're also doing is around our strategic priority of sustain. We've got I've mentioned the renewable energy cluster, but we've also started a corporate social responsibility cluster. And that was in fact initiated by Non-Kubela at Volkswagen. And the idea there, because businesses are catching on to this whole thing of when you've got a problem, then you cluster together to try and solve it. And we've brought in a whole bunch of different companies, and we're looking at how can we together do something in the community that has impact instead of everybody doing their own thing. You know, so that's going to evolve. It'll be interesting to see where that goes, because normally companies don't work together on that basis. And then we also established a Nelson Mandela Bay Climate Change Coalition. And that's actually quite an interesting one, where we engage with the Presidential Climate Commission, and we gave them our views in terms of what's happening here, what needs to be done, and they bought into what we're doing. And then they came up with this idea of a climate resilient framework that needs to be established for the city, and then ultimately that could become a climate change SEZ. And that could be a way for us to also help reinvent the economy and also attract national and international funding, because it could be a global first if you become a climate change resilient city. You know, it's very aspirational, very ambitious goal, but we must work towards that. So we had the we had the Presidential Climate Commission here last week. There was an event where a pledge was signed, where the various stakeholders have now committed to supporting it. They've also contracted a service provider to develop this strategy framework, which will take about 18 months to develop. But the way you need to look at this is, I think before people used to debate whether climate change was real or not, but I think now there's an acceptance that it is real and it is happening. And if you look at the Industrial Revolution that happened a long time ago, you can liken what's going on now to, we're calling it the carbon revolution. So, businesses need to reduce their carbon footprint, but the implications are huge in terms of how you do things. And just quick to mention, we also have an entrepreneurship desk that we started in April last year, because we can't just focus on the big businesses, even though they have a knock-on impact on the whole value chain. And that's actually been a very successful. Lunga drives that. And we have 242 registered businesses that are now part of that. We didn't set any targets, and we've got almost 70% are Black-owned and 52% female-owned. And what's nice about that is it's very practical in terms of what we do. It's not pie in the sky kind of things. We have a lot of businesses that we got to commit to provide free pro bono support, legal advice, HR advice, how do you draw up an employment contract, things like practical things that businesses can use. And then we also have a partnership with ECDC where we do training programs to develop enterprise development and exporters training and so on. So that has gone very well. But where our energy is focused now, so I've spoken about the enabling environment, but it's the disruption of the economy. And this low carbon revolution it has serious ramifications for us here in Nelson Mandela Bay. We are a manufacturing city. That is the basis of our economy. And what's happening in the automotive sector now with the shift to electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells, and so on, it puts us in a very difficult situation, because if you open up the bonnet, has anyone driven an electric vehicle? Okay, very different experience to driving an ICE vehicle. ICE is the internal combustion engine. But if you open the bonnet and you look at what's inside, it's just a battery. Okay, so you're basically going from 2,000 moving parts to 20. Okay, the ramifications is huge. If converter companies, as an example, you don't need a catalytic converter in an electric vehicle. So that means that a lot of our component sector, they're at risk of not existing soon. Because the automotive industry works in up to 7-year cycles where they make decisions, and a lot of them are planning for alternative vehicles, not ICE vehicles. So we need to move fast in terms of this reinvention. And the problem is, from a policy and regulatory environment and infrastructure perspective, South Africa is way behind. So we now need to leapfrog over that if we want to stay in the game. So this is something that we really push in hard. And what we've done is we've set up a local economy reinvention think tank. I think there was some amusement as well when we started that, like, what is that all about? But the buy-in has been absolutely incredible. We've got people from all over the Nelson Mandela Bay business community that are plugged into the various work streams, mostly engineers and out-of-the-box thinkers. And the one work stream is a Hive Project Downstream work stream that we've got going. And Hive they've joined the chamber. They a green ammonia. They want to set up a green ammonia factory in the Kucha IDZ. They're making their final investment decision in June. And if that goes ahead, it will create 20,000 jobs, which is massive. We've never seen that kind of job creation in this city. I don't even remember that in my lifetime. So we're keeping close to them, and there's a lot of downstream opportunities that will come out of that. So we've got people brainstorming those and what could those be. And then the second work stream we have is electrolyzer manufacturing. And there's a global shortage of these electrolyzers. And in fact, we worked with Hive to bring this Danish company here last week that manufacture electrolyzers. We took them to Gendermark. We showed them the skills, the capabilities, because we've really got incredible skills here in the city. We've got world-class companies that operate here. When I used to work at General Motors, often what we did here in South Africa was use as examples in other places in the world. So we mustn't undersell ourselves. I think the best kept secret when you really think about it. But that electrolyzer manufacturing is something that would also benefit companies today that are currently catalytic converter manufacturers, where in the future they could manufacture electrolyzers because they'd have the capabilities to do that. And then we're also looking at something called automotive mobility. It's a word we made up. But you find at a national level, everyone is talking electric vehicles. We've realized that it's way beyond electric. It's hydrogen, it's green ammonia fueled vehicles, and with Hive coming, that could be an opportunity. E-tractors, e-bikes, we need to think beyond just a normal automobile. So that's where that work stream is going, and I'm sure they're going to get to some interesting places. Then we have the Green Energy Hub, which fits in with what we're doing with the Presidential Climate Commission. And then we've also got a global gaps work stream going. And we've roped in companies like Aspen and Mandela and like all different, so it's not just auto industry. And we're looking at, could we manufacture medical devices here? End-of-life engines, when the world moves over to other types of vehicles, who's going to provide the aftermarket support? Why can't we do it from here? Wind turbine manufacturing. As the world moves more and more to renewable energy sources, why don't we manufacture the wind turbines instead of importing, solar panels, who knows where we could take this to. So the innovation is here. And then we also want to set up a skills development hub, because where we're going is a very different place. We need more technical skills. So you often find there's a gap with tertiary institutions and industry in terms of the requirements. And a lot of people end up studying public administration, management, and marketing, and all sorts of things. But we actually need technical people. We need engineers, plumbers, electricians. Even there's a company called S4 that they opened a new building on Circular Drive, opposite the Garden Shopping Center. It's absolutely amazing when you go to that place. It's like going to Google or somewhere like that. They've got 160 software developers that work there. And they're all young people that have these skills. So there's a lot going on. So what we're trying to do now is we want to get an inventory of what are the skills that we currently have in the city, what are the gaps, and what are the future needs. But to get this right, we need all the companies to work together and share that information, which is a big ask because from a competitive perspective, there's a war for talent, So that I need resourcing for and that, but I think that's going to be very important. So that's where we're going with the think tank. And really, we believe in the potential of Nelson Mandela Bay. We are a two-port city. We can unlock this. And I'm not sure if you know, but we're the least windiest city out of all the coastal cities. But we're also the number one producer of wind and solar power in the country. So we've got a lot going here. We've got a moderate climate. It's a good place for international companies to be based in terms of the lifestyle. So we've got a lot on offer. I remember the Americans that used to work with me, they used to come here and they were very fearful. But by the time they had to leave back on assignment, they didn't want to leave because they get so attached to the city. We just need to get the basics working. We've got so much opportunity. And I've put here, there's a ray of hope. In fact, at the session we had last week with on climate change, the words were used, a city of hope and potential. That's how Nelson Mandela Bay was described. It really is. And we've got amazing people here. It's just the enabling environment that's not working, and that's what we need to get right. And the Bay is a manageable size. We've got wide urban sprawl. But we can get our arms around it. And if you look at what we've done with the business community in a short space of time where we've got everybody as a collective working together, why can't the churches do the same? It's very, very possible. And then we're also forming growing national alliances. So as we're doing what we're doing, we're getting more and more national bodies coming down here and people showing interest in what we're doing because they want to know what's going on in Nelson Mandela Bay. So that's also a positive, and we will willingly share our what we're doing with others because this is not a selfish endeavor. This is for the greater good of the city, and we also want the country to work as well. So in terms of the linkages that we're forming, We've got I've mentioned the one with the Presidential Climate Commission, but we also have NAMSA, which represents the auto industry. So if you look at the work we're doing in the think tank and so on, they're absolutely key, and also around energy and logistics. So we've got a MOU in place with them. We're also going to get one in place with the components sector, with NARCAM. And then we've got an informal relationship with Business Leadership South Africa. So they're also including us on a national level so that we can also have a voice for our city, because we very much backwater status here. People often forget about us. We've been called the armpit of South Africa and other horrible names, which aren't true. So we need to claim our rightful place. And we've also had the Public-Private Growth Initiative here. Remember Rolf Meyer? He came here with Daniel Ngwepe. They heard about what we were doing, and they were very supportive, and their comments were that this is what South Africa needs to be doing at a city level, you know. So that was very positive. Business Against Crime, I've been talking to them. We've got them coming down this month, and we're going to do a strategy session with them, and we're trying to motivate for them to appoint a project leader so that we can get some focus around the critical crime issues. So business is very much affected by cable theft and vandalism, and truck hijackings is a big issue as well. So we're hoping that we'll get support. We're an NPO, so we depend on funding from our members through their membership fees. So it's tough when you're trying to embark upon ambitious projects like we are doing. So we are trying to raise funding from other sources as well, so that we can set up a trade desk, because we need to start promoting the city. For example, when investors come here, where do they go? You know, and many of them are coming here now, but we're not set up to give them the information that they need. So we need to get that desk going as well. And then also to show you our growing partnerships that we're establishing, and we're also getting our members to upgrade their involvement with us, and you can see the types of companies that are actively involved in the chamber. And then we also have the clusters, and then we also have a number of sponsors. So we basically have around 700 members, and we estimate that's around 100,000 people that are directly employed by them. In terms of what's next, we need to set up to succeed. So we've got the vision, the strategy, there's buy-in to that, but now the implementation needs to be there. There's more action on the ground. So we need that trade desk so that we can start marketing the city properly. You know, we continue in tandem with the enabling environment issues. And it's tough when you have the US consulate or the German embassy here or whoever comes to see us, because you know they're reading the media and they're seeing what's happening in terms of logistics and electricity. But when we tell them about the mobilization and the commitment of business, they can see the opportunity here. So we must continue to be positive in what we do. We want to get a strategic project manager for our think tank. So we're looking for funding for that. We need a cluster support resource, skills development hub. We need someone to drive that. I've already spoken about business against crime. And then we also need to continue to strengthen the work of our entrepreneurship desk. So resourcing is where my focus is. And then in terms of driving change, I just wanted to share some of my learnings, and I think I have mentioned some of them already, but strong leadership and positive leadership is absolutely vital. And I think our country, like many other countries around the world, we do suffer from a leadership crisis. And we need moral leadership, ethical leadership, you know, where people align along common values. And then we also need action. Can't just talk. And it's amazing how with some of these stakeholders you have meetings and then they confuse meetings with doing something, you know. So that mind shift has to change. We need fast decision-making, speed. Things are just too slow. You know, nobody is moving fast enough, and the world is moving fast. You know, we have to get faster if we want to be in the game. Collaboration, I've spoken about that. And then also focus on what's within your control, because the challenge we have is as you succeed at something, then everybody starts coming at you and they want you to do this and that. And you can't do everything. So you have to to focus where you can have the most impact and influence, you know. And then unity of purpose, I spoke about that as well, where rather focus on your unity and what brings you together than what divides you, you know. And we all bring unique strengths to the table wherever we come from. And all of this needs to be underpinned by hope. I think too many people in South Africa have lost hope. They're too negative. I mean, I also find I just can't be around people that are over negative anymore, because it just doesn't help anything. It doesn't serve any purpose. So we all need to adjust our thinking, and we need to start having hope and believing. It starts with that. And yeah, so the mind shift as well that we need to do is, as a metro, we need to shift from victim mentality to being a functional metro. We can do this. And we also need to accept the reality. So it's not about being naive. The issues are there. Electricity is not where it should be, and logistics and so on. But accept that and adjust to this new normal, and what are we going to do about it? The cluster approach, I think, in terms of survival, we need each other to survive. We can't do this on our own. And we need to stop whining. You know, I think whining is just a waste of energy. And then, yeah, I've spoken about positive leadership, and then also growth mindset, where we're more solutions orientated. It's out of the box thinking. There is no stupid idea. I mean, some of the ideas I've come up with, people have laughed at. And some of them have amounted to nothing, but some of them have become something. And even with our think tank, if we get 2 or 3 out of 10 initiatives going, then we've achieved something. You know, and we must build hope through unity of purpose. And then also when we have wins, we must celebrate the wins. You know, so that's my view. And then I also want to just keep driving this message around hope. And hope is embracing uncertainty. And also, titles don't make leaders, actions do. You know, that's something we all need to remember. And then, yeah, that's my presentation. So I hope that was what you're looking for.